We are talking about DFS here in this room today. From what I understand, it's the big guys section, so I followed the map and came here. There's supposed to be two other panelists with us today. Are you filling in for Chris or no? You're on the panel. So we were supposed to have Detroit Beastie, if you're following him on Twitter, does a lot of DFS, specifically a lot of MLB right now. And you can find on Fantasy Six Pack, which you'll hear in a second. I'm Kelly Singh. You can find me at Kelly in Phoenix. DFS has been a really exciting part of my life. And I'm just here. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I just love to share maybe some of the things that I do. I'm very successful in my DFS, I find. And I share my results, which I think is really important too. So that's me.
So my name is Dave Eddy. I work at Fantasy Six Pack. I actually recruited Chris Robin, Detroit BC, to join us. So we've done a little bit of content together already for DFS. We had a video that came out maybe last week, maybe the end of 2 weeks ago, talking about just the pricing, with DK coming out with their pricing for week 1. And so we've got all sorts of stuff in store over there. He's going to be doing a showdown video for every primetime slate. So every Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night, you'll have a video. And then we're going to do our just, regular main slate stuff every week as well. So we've got a lot of stuff going on over there, so you can check us out.
Yeah. I mean, how do we want to run? Do you guys want to ask questions? Do you want us just go off the cuff?
Well, let's ask this then. So we play a lot of DFS. I've been playing for 5 years or longer. I don't even know. But maybe kind of just your best practices kind of things, like kind of general philosophy kind of stuff.
Sure. Obviously, it depends on what kind of game you're playing, which changes your strategy a bit. But one of the biggest things I have found, I've been playing DFS for 3 years now, but don't just stick to one set of data. I have found that I look at multiple sets of data, and if you're trying to win money, I feel like you have to spend money, and that's on your tools. There are a lot of free tools out there, and that's fantastic, but I'm a subscriber to 3 paid tools myself, and they're not that crazy expensive. They're anywhere from like $9.99 to $19.99. I'm not like a high dollar gal or anything like that when it comes to it. But what I like to do is compare those tools, because some of them are going to go a certain number of games back or weeks back, depending on the sport. And so that's going to fluctuate the numbers you get back. So if you're seeing that somebody's killing it, and then you're like, okay, I'm just going to go with it. But then you look at this other tool and like, okay, this tool goes back this many years or this many weeks or this many games. So it's important to really take a broader look at your data when you're making your decisions. And that's been very helpful to me. And what I do from there is create a pool, which is you're no stranger to a pool. You're going to create a pool of your picks. And from that pool, there's going to be some that are just going to start rising to the top as you compare the data. And I promise you, if you're not comparing different data sites, it's going to change the way you look at playing DFS. You're going to look at your pool in a completely different way, because names are just going to start, like I said, rising to the top, because you're going to see it on this tool, you're going to see it on this tool, you're going to see it on this tool, and that's how you feel confident. That's how I feel confident in my pick, when I see it, the data in multiple places and not just a gut feeling or I read it on this site. I'm seeing it in multiple places, and it builds confidence. So that's my process, kind of.
So I think whether you're brand new or whether you've been doing it for a while, I think the first question you've really got to ask yourself is what your goal is, and that can change from year to year. In prior years, I used to be very heavy in just MME, so 20 max tournaments, 150 max, 3 max, that kind of stuff. and there's a high volatility to that, right? You're not going to win every week. It's not really possible to do that. And so, just kind of getting, sprinklings of, what other people do, I started to get some interest in playing just cash games. So that can either be just head-to-head, me versus Kelly, or it can be like double ups where, however many people are in the field, basically half the people get paid. And whether you get first or, whatever the cut line is, you just double your money. So there's not as much upside there, but there's also not as much volatility. So anyways, the point of telling you all that was I used to be very heavy into MME, and then I kind of started mixing them together. And now I'm actually a little more focused on cash, oddly enough. And so you got to just figure out what your goal is, right? So if your goal is just to say, I've got $500 that I'm willing to allocate over the course of the season, and you aren't, trying to necessarily be a millionaire, which I know we'd all like to be, but that's not really always a realistic goal. If you say at the end of the season, man, if I won $1,000, I would be thrilled. Well, maybe cash is the way to go. You could much easier to get that kind of a goal playing cash than playing MME, because you can go through that 500 real quick. And then what do? Now you're done after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks or something, whereas cash, it's a little bit more steady. It's a little bit less of a roller coaster. So I think simply, developing what your goal is and then deciding what is the format that's going to best, achieve that. And, there's nothing wrong with reaching out and, seeking help, especially when you're brand new. The learning curve for DFS is monumental. Like, you don't know what you don't know. And, you've really got to find either a site or some tools or find something that can help get you to start understanding what's going on, start getting your feet wet, start bouncing, what you're thinking and what you want to do off of other people, getting feedback from people. And I find that even for, somebody like myself, who's been playing for a long time, there were times at the end of last year where I would actually DM Scott right here, and I would show him my lineup, a single entry, let's say, and I'd say, hey, Scott, this is what I'm looking at this week. I know it's a little bit out there compared to maybe like what ownership projections are and stuff, but talk me off the ledge or tell me I'm a genius. Either way, because I respect Scott, and I know Scott, does some work in the field as well. And, it's just nice to have people that, you respect and you feel like you can rely on. Because if you try to just go this journey on your own in DFS, I can almost assure you without just pure luck, you're gonna lose a lot of money,
I second that. In finding a community, there are a lot of online communities, whether you're into forums or if you use a tool like Discord, which is the new forum for everybody. Lots of chats, lots of community, and it's very worthwhile, and they're often free. What I think we should do is gauge, I guess, the level of play in here. So raise your hand if please participate with me. Raise your hand if you're 2 years or less or consider yourself new to DFS. All right, a couple of hands, 3 hands were, and I see some women in here too. That's exciting to see. I hope that you're playing and enjoying yourself, but that's really helpful too, to share kind of what we're talking about. But I myself, I'm not a high dollar player for DFS. For props, I put a lot of money down on props. For DFS, I find that it keeps me in the game. I find that I like the thrill of winning, so I really do enjoy those double up tournaments. But I will only spend, not only, but I find myself putting like a dollar tournament, a $5 tournament when I'm feeling really fancy. But that for me brings joy. So I play DFS for the joy of playing. Do I want to win? Of course I want to win, but I keep that balance in there. And I don't know if this is helpful to any of you. This is fairly new, but anytime I would make $150, big money, I pull out $100 and I will play on that $50. And when I get another $150, I pull out $100. And that is how I was able to buy my daughter a car. I saved up an entire football season, an entire golf season, because I play both DFS golf and DFS football and props. And that was my strategy for saving. And I don't know if you have ever thought about your strategy for saving or portioning out your winnings. And it sounds so silly and elementary maybe, but that is how I held on to my money and was able to keep playing even at small increments.
So, I mean, I do something very similar to that. I've got a dollar threshold on my account, right? And once I exceed that, I cash that out. And then, I'm back to square one, if you will. And then, you're going to lose a little bit, and then you win something decent, and you cash it out back to that amount. And that's high enough that, I can withstand a streak if need be. But that's so very similar to that. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense it's just bankroll management, right? And, it's not... it's not playing above your means, and it's kind of making it so that, you do have the longevity of it, and, you're making a profit, not just paying to play.
Right.
But she was saying about, how she enters stuff. I do it a little bit differently. I play very high volume. I don't necessarily play like the high buy-ins, like you can get into, single entries that...
Tens and 20s and hundreds of games. I'm doing like 5 games. Sorry for the camera. Not only is it small increments, it's also like 1 game, 2 games, maybe up to 5 games for me. I don't use a tool that will pull out all my pools and I can under 100. I'm not interested in that. For fun play to keep me engaged. So that's my style.
So we have a very big contrast here then, because I do the opposite. On a given week, I will have 2,500 to 4,000 entries in, and right. And I mean, so it sounds like a lot, but that's me on DraftKings, right? And that's me entering every 20 max tournament. That's me entering every 150 max tournament up to. It's only up to like the $3 one on DraftKings. So there's just a lot of the 10-cent tournaments. So it's only $2 to enter, but you can get in like 50 of them a week. So right there's 1,000 lineups. And then I do the maximum on the head-to-heads. So you can do 50 of them at each dollar level. So there's $50 ones, $52 ones, anyways, you can get into a lot of entries without sitting there spending, thousands and thousands of dollars. But that's where I have to have a tool, because I'm building, not necessarily, if I have 3,500 entries for a week, I don't have 3,500 unique lineups. I may have 700 of those are unique, but I have to have a tool, which is an entirely different conversation if somebody wants to get into it. But that's the way that I've chosen to play, right? So my thought process, the way that I do my research, the data that I'm looking for, a very high-end result. I'm not in those kind of tournaments. I'm not just trying to cash. I'm trying to win. So that's how you win money playing at a high volume like that. Is you're not building with just chalk the most popular players all the time, because you pretty much give away your chance to actually win. Scott. Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, do you, and this is from both of us, we like to do, last year we were entering 150 lineups into the 25 cent, 50 cent, whatever it was. Are you going with your strategy heavy focus on one quarterback a week? Like he would go, I'm going Joe Burrow. Or would you go, okay, I'm going to have 25% Joe Burrow, I'm going to have 30% Patrick Mahomes, 10% Dak because it's a Dak week or whatever it is. So kind of what was your approach as a volume guy? Yeah, so I kind of want to get another Psycho's approach.
So this is not a cop-out answer. This is just the real answer. The real answer is every week is different. I mean, every week is different. So there's very few, if any, things that I have as a hard and fast rule in DFS where I say I'm doing this. Some are have more wiggle room than others, but when it comes to quarterbacks, it's like Kelly said, right? I start the week off and I have a clean slate. I have 0 quarterbacks that I'm interested in. And then I kind of go team by team, matchup by matchup, game by. I just kind of whittle my way through, and I'm okay. Who really stands out to me, right? And it's kind of like, you know, if you're really hungry and you go into the fridge, right? Everything looks good. So I may start off with 10 or 12 quarterbacks that I'm interested in, but I'm never going to play that many. You know, even running it through my optimizer, it's not going to, you know, that's too many. So then I'll start to become real picky. Now I'll start whittling it down. I'll say, oh, okay, I've got 12 guys in there. Let me start looking through and who stands out amongst the standouts. And so maybe I'll end up with a normal week, maybe 3 at the minimum, probably. 5 is probably the max. And then it's not necessarily a clean, I've got 5 quarterbacks, I'm going to do 20% apiece, right? There may be a couple of guys that really stand out where I'll say, all right, I'm going to go, you know, I'm willing to go as high as 30% Justin Herbert. I'm willing to go as high as 30% Patrick Mahomes. The other 3 guys, you know, maybe they're going to be at 20%. And then we'll just see how it shakes out. So, yeah, so that Joe?
Yeah, so my question to you is, when you're building your lineups, do you start with your, like, looking for your studs, like your stars, building around them first, or do you go looking for the values first and then building around them?
It's a really good question, because I want to address something that you said about playing chalk every week. I don't play chalk every week. I like to find that if we're going to say value doesn't even mean their salary on the roster to me. Value means what are they going to bring to my team. So whether they're a $10,000 pick or a $2,000 pick, I'm looking at the data in between that maybe the casual player or somebody who does play chalk every week isn't going to see. So being that I play on a smaller scale, I do put more time into finding first my big player where I'm going to put the majority of my money. So that is my strategy first, is where's the majority of my money be? And it may not be the stud, but it might be the one that everybody's projecting to do well this week. My highest spend first, and then I start building around that. But yeah, I wanted to also clarify that value piece, because some people confuse value for an inexpensive player that you're going to roster versus what they're bringing to your team. Did you want to?
Let me answer Joe's question.
I start at the top. Do that?
I'm going to say this all the time, and I promise you it's never a cop-out answer. But again, the answer always is, it's always slate dependent, right? And the word value is very subjective. I think when most people hear the word value, they think, okay, it's going to be a cheap running back. It's going to be a cheap quarterback. That doesn't necessarily need to be the case. Like, I think that's the common phrase, you know, that people use. When they say value, they typically mean a guy that's not going to cost me a lot of money. Right. But what you can look at value in a variety of ways. So value to me can also mean what someone's ownership percentage is compared to somebody else's. So Justin Jefferson could be a great value in a particular week, okay?
Because not that many people are rostering them.
Sure. So let's say that, you know, the Vikings are going up against the 49ers, and, you know, people are going to look at that and say, well, that's a little bit of a tough matchup. Maybe Justin Jefferson isn't going to be the guy that I'm going to focus on this week because Jamar Chase is going up against the Cardinals. And they're relatively, you know, this. You get my point. But so now to me, even though Justin Jefferson may be, you know, a couple of $100 more expensive, if I can get him at a quarter of the ownership that I can get Jamar Chase, anytime that I can find a stud that I can argue provides me with a good value in some fashion, usually that's ownership, to me that is a tremendous value, even if he costs me $9,500. To answer your question, Joe, more specifically, typically I will build around my stack. I'll usually, I always start with quarterbacks first as I go through with my process for the week. So what I do is on Tuesdays, I spend however long it takes me to break down quarterbacks for the week and at least get my rough draft player pool. Wednesday, I do running backs. Thursdays, I do wide receivers. Friday, I do running backs, tight ends. I combine it all on Saturday, kind of start to put some stuff together, and that's when I start looking. It's more a matter of, does anything really stand out? If there is an injury and it vaults, a $5,200 running back is, a really good value because of his salary in that case, then maybe I start to build there and I say, you know what, I'm going to be overweight on this particular running back. I'm going to be playing a lot of him, so I got some money to play with. I can be more interested in a Mahomes or a Hurts or a Josh Allen because I know that I can save a little bit of money there. But that's not normal. So normally, yes, I would start off with a stack that I really like. Who's the quarterback I like the most? And then now how do I correlate him? Am I correlating with a wide receiver? Probably. I'm not necessarily going to focus on his, wide receiver one because everybody's going to be doing that. So I kind of focus, how do I want to, approach, this stack? Do I want to double stack? Do I want to add a tight end in the mix? Do I want to do two receivers? And, being that I'm building so many lineups, I end up doing a little bit of everything, but it's how much exposure do I do that? So if I'm playing Joe Burrow in a particular week and I'm going to have 30% of Joe Burrow, how do I want to allocate those stacks? So I want to do 20% with Jamar Chase, 10% with like T. Higgins, or do I want to go 10% Chase, 10% Higgins, and 10% with one of them and a tight end, or two of them together? And so that's kind of how I break it down, Joe.
So my question is for both you guys, but particularly you. So how do you determine, making $100 a week is great, like that. I mean, I'll take that all year long, that adds up. How did you figure out, how did you come up with this, 5? And I'd like to hear about your process too for 4,000 entries. Where do you see generally success, but particularly with you, what are your 5 things that you're doing? How are you, and then how is that translating to, $100?
Yeah, so for me, I'm very focused on, you mentioned winning. All of us are very focused on winning. We obviously want a winning roster. And for me, that process is really researching it out, the contests that I enter, looking at multiple tools when I create my lineup. So I'm trying to think, how do I formulate this? How am I formulating this answer? How do I get to $100 each week? Or yeah. Yeah. I do a lot of single entry tournaments for myself, and I do a lot of the double up tournaments too, because I think if I'm putting in 5 and I'm getting back 10, that's a quick return for me, and I find that I win a lot of those. So that's probably the fastest way that I'm making money, is in those double up tournaments. It's not as exciting because I can be in 108th place and still be doubling up, but I want in those single entry, if I'm in 108th place, I could be winning well over $100 at that point if it's much broader. So I think my favorite tournaments are double up. I think it's the fastest way to make money if you're only playing a handful of tournaments. And then I usually will play the same roster because I spent so much time researching it. If I'm only going to play 5 contests or this week, I've spent a lot of time picking those guys, and I feel really good about them. So I don't necessarily play percentages either, like you do. But I do have a pool. It'll be about 30 players at the end of the day, maybe. But then I pull out of there who rose to the top for me, and I use that roster everywhere. But doubling up, does that answer? The double up tournaments are my favorite. And it's usually like a $5 or a $3, and I'll get back 6 or 10. I hardly ever lose a double up tournament, actually. So that's easy to get to 100 if I'm playing 5 or two. Yeah, I'll usually do I would say 4 of them. Yeah.
Well, so that's a loaded question because everybody's different. Everyone's different. So Kelly has obviously, gotten her feet wet in a little bit of everything, and she would like to win $1 million just like we all would. But it sounds like she has found out over trial and error that she's most successful in double ups, or at least cash, and so that's where she focuses her time and attention. However her process is, however her brain works, it works and it's good for double ups. There are other people who are terrible in cash, but they're absolutely fantastic in big tournaments in MME. So I think that nobody can answer that question for you. I think you've got to find yourself entering cash, find yourself entering single entry, do MME, and you can do it at a very small level and just get a feel for what are you good at. What is it that you excel in? Or if you're not necessarily hyper focused on the cash, what is it that you enjoy the most? Like Kelly said, playing double ups is kind of boring because if I'm in a double up with 20,000 people, whether I get first or 9,000th place, I've doubled my money. That's kind of boring when you're in first. Whenever you go, man, if I'd have entered that tournament in the Sunday Million, right? If I'd have just, spend that $20 on the Sunday Million as opposed to the double up, I would have won $25,000. So.
You can't do that though. You can't dwell on that.
No, but it just depends on what you like to do. And again, it comes back to, like I said originally, what are your goals? If your goal is money's irrelevant to me, I'm going to drop $100 a week, and I really don't care if I win or lose. I'm trying to win a bunch of money, and I'm not going to lose. If I lose $100, I really don't care. Some people are like that. That's fine. There are other people who will play $5 a week, and if they lose that $5, that's a huge bummer to them. So they're probably more apt to want to play cash. It's a lot less volatile. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, my question is for you, though. Like, what have you found for you that you're seeing great success doing, like, 20-person tournaments, easy fees, cash? Like, what have you personally kind of noticed about yourself that I tend to be good at this, and then why?
So the way that my brain works, I do the best in 20 max. Yeah, because not that there's not a lot of strategy in double ups, because they're absolutely, we could talk an hour on how to build cash lineups easily. But the way that my brain works and the way that I excel in my thinking strategically revolves better around 20 max, where I can get my hand in a variety of different pots because I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen, right? But you can take really educated guesses at, if this happens, then, this is where I want to go. And then, so you start to build your lineup. Your lineup tells a story. I say, if this is going to work, then, it makes it likely that this is going to work. And then you just kind of build an entire narrative around each game, which is around, each one of your lineups. And you kind of cover your bases for the most part in 20 max. So, like, back to Scott's original question, do you just play one quarterback? I don't. Because if I knew that, Josh Allen was going to have a massive week, then sure, I absolutely would play Josh Allen. But if I'm wrong about Josh Allen and I'm right about everything else, I'm still going to have a terrible week. So, it also, I guess, comes down to how risk averse are you? Again, whether you're playing $5 or $1,000 a week, if you don't care about that money, then I would absolutely say, if you really are that confident that Josh Allen is going to be the guy and he's going to throw in week 1 2 touchdown passes to Dalton Kincaid, then knock yourself out and stack him in every single one of your lineups. And if you're right, you're going to be fantastic. If you're wrong, you don't care about that money anyways. So who really cares? But yeah, but I don't think a lot of people, I think everyone plays to win. And I don't think there's a lot of people that, are just, again, whether you're playing for 5 or 5,000, that, just don't care if they lose and are just solely in it, just simply chasing that title. There's people out there, but they're few and far between, in my opinion. So, okay, thank you.
I think I'm finding this very interesting as I'm sitting here because we play so differently. And I was sitting here thinking, should I even be sitting here? But then I thought, you know what? I'm not the only person that plays DFS the way that I play DFS. So I'm happy to sit here and tell you that I only play a handful of tournaments every week and that I only play, under $50 every week because I make my own profit and that's my goal. I have a goal that I'm saving for usually, but also just for the joy of playing. So hopefully you get something from anything that I've shared with you today, because you can tell that our style is very different indeed. But now I want to pat myself on the back and say, you know what? You do have something to say because you're not the only person that plays this way. So that's all I wanted to say about that, I guess. I did, yeah.
So before we just go off on some tangent, because we have some time, are there any other questions about, I mean, it could be completely high level, low level. Yes, sir. So you're talking about like punting, like multiple positions?
Ooh.
Gotcha. Okay, I heard.
I actually find great success playing tight ends, and nobody seems to believe me, but I feel like tight end is the most undervalued position in both regular fantasy football and daily fantasy sports. They bring in more points than I think anybody realizes, especially when you have a tight end that acts as a wide receiver one. So I am a huge fan of playing doubling up on my tight ends in a flex position.
I would say that it's something I very rarely do, but it definitely depends on the slate. I could not say that I've never done so, but typically whenever I build my lineups, I'm using an optimizer, which doesn't sound like Kelly does. I'm using an optimizer, and one of the rules that I set is that my flex position can only be a running back or a wide receiver. Now, the exception to that rule sometimes can be if I've got a Travis Kelce against anybody but the Cardinals, where I think, Travis Kelce is, let's say he's, $7,000. He's a mid-price wide receiver. I would be very interested in playing Travis Kelce, and I wouldn't even necessarily consider him as a tight end. So that may be a situation where I would extend my rules to say, I only want one tight end in my lineup unless I have Travis Kelce. If I have Travis Kelce, then I can put another tight end into the flex. And I would only be doing that as a punt. I don't know. I would never play, two high-priced tight ends. I don't think.
I agree with that. I would agree with that as well. And I like how you expanded on that. You want to have one tight end because you have to have one tight end, but you're saying then you can expand the rules in your optimizer to allow the flex player then to not just be a wide receiver or running back, but a tight end that fits this build that you're doing. I like that. I actually do. I like that. But as I've already mentioned to you in my strategy of play, it's very research-based, and I'm going to be like, okay, I'm playing Mark Andrews this week as my flex, not as my tight end, because I'm going to play Gesicki in the tight end spot this week. So, yeah. Oh, I do like that, though.
But it is a unique situation, though, usually, and it almost always revolves around Travis Kelce, and it's got to be, again, a situation where he's not, $9,000 or something. He's got to be reasonably priced, and there's got to be a pool of punt tight ends that I like enough that I'm willing to go that route. I think the tight end position in itself, though, is kind of an interesting topic that we can lead into, because for me, I should say never, because there is no such thing as never, but I very rarely play anyone for tight end in the middle. It is either an absolute punt tight end just chasing a touchdown, knowing that I'm going to take that salary and I'm going to allocate it somewhere else. And as long as I'm correct with that allocation, I'm going to be okay. If I waste that money on somebody else that's no good, then it was pointless anyways. But I either am at the absolute bottom or I'm at the absolute top, So pretty much for me on a normal week, if it's not, Kelsey or Andrews or maybe Kittle, then I am playing guys that, nobody has any interest in playing. And that's good in a variety of reasons. Talking about my optimizer, another thing that I personally do just from experience is I always force my optimizer to give me at least one player who is at projected to be 3% or less ownership. And so a lot of times that's where my tight end will come in, because I'm punting tight end anyways. So I'm going to play a guy that no one's really comfortable playing. And if he scores me a touchdown, I really don't get like one catch for 1 yard and a touchdown. And I would sign up for that all week long. I'm very happy with that. My $2,600 gets me 7 points, and I'm rocking and I'm rolling.
Wait, you brought up a really good point, though, about rostership and tight ends, because that's why I like playing 2 tight ends, is because in that flex position is where I'm finding the value, not just the value on the salary, but the value in the scoring potential. So you led right into that for me. It makes sense to me to play a tight end because not everybody is on the tight end train.
Thank you. I have to advocate for the 2 tight end because you can get a value at them at their price, and then sometimes you can suck out a super performance, and it just gives you the edge over everybody, and it's so unique. I had a lineup that was very unique, and nobody else duped it, and I had 5 touchdowns between my 2 tight ends, and that is what put me into the money that was substantial. And so if you can get super unique in those single entry tournaments, like you said, where you have a 2 tight end, maybe they're Kelsey and then a pay down who does something, then you're so unique. So I do like that aspect, but it's hard to hit the I mean, it was Higbee had 3 touchdowns against the Eagles, and then Jordan Reed from San Francisco had 2 touchdowns against the Jets, and then he got hurt. You know what I mean? So it's like you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how it's going to go down. But I like for like the tournaments, don't do it all the time that are like mass entry. But for the single tournaments or the single entry, it's just I love it.
No, you're totally right, and that makes so much sense. Like, you're expounding on what I want to come out of my mouth. It's not coming out so eloquently. But I love that. And I also want to touch on something else that you sparked in my brain when we talk about tight ends, or maybe I think it relates best to tight ends, is that there are teams, they're playing a tight end. They have to play a tight end. They might not be a good team, and I'll go ahead and throw my Cardinals under the bus. The Cardinals are probably not going to win a lot of games this year, but they still have players that have to play, take the field. They still have a quarterback who's throwing passes. Marquise Brown, still going to catch passes. Zach Ertz, he is week 1 or week 2, I'm hearing in the local. Zach Ertz is still going to be the tight end 1 for the Cardinals. He's going to be an extreme value both in dollar amount and in production. So that's an instance where I would definitely be looking to play 2 tight ends when it's a terrible team, but Zach Ertz is going to eat. No matter if they win or lose, he's still going to get the ball. And so those are other instances where I'm looking to play a player like that.
And to go even further on Scott's point here, being unique can be extraordinarily important, but again, it comes down to what your goal is. So if you are simply, if you're kind of risk adverse and you say, I'm going to enter this, 20 max, $3 a piece contest. I'm going to put $60 in this. And yeah, I would like to win, but I really don't want to lose my 60. So I'm going to play it a little safe. I'm going to play a little bit chalky, knowing that I might get lucky and maybe I will win. At least I have that opportunity, So I want to build it similar-ish to a cash lineup because I'm risk adverse, but I want to take the chance on getting lucky. So that would be an example maybe where you don't do, 2 tight end, right? But 2 tight end is going to make you, like Scott said, very unique. There's not a lot of people that are going to go that 2 tight end route on almost every single week, right? And I think one thing that gets lost, and this isn't for cash, this would be more for big tournaments, is, and when you're building a cash lineup, to me, I really do not care what anybody else is doing. Ownership for me in tournaments, that is literally that's my number one primary focus. It's not so much, it's correlating my lineup properly, and it's trying to be unique without being absolutely crazy, because but in cash I could care less. Ownership means nothing to me. If I knew that in this double up that Josh Allen was going to be 80% owned, that would actually probably make me more apt to play him, because if Josh Allen goes crazy and I don't have him, I'm in the 20% mind. I'm pretty much done. Whereas if I play Josh Allen, even if maybe that's not my pick for the week, right or wrong, it's fine, because I'm with the majority of the field. So even if so sometimes you have to play that game. But one of the biggest, Scott asked me for all my secrets earlier. So one of the biggest things I think that changed the way that I played was the mindset that, and this sounds crazy, but I'm not necessarily trying to come up with the highest scoring lineup each week, which theoretically that makes sense, right? Like, I just want to play the best players, so I want to come up with the highest score possible. But I think DFS really comes down to a matter of, I'm playing against Scott, and I'm playing against Kelly, and I'm playing against everybody. So it's really a game of, I'm trying to outscore you. I'm not necessarily trying to come up with the highest score possible, because you and I are going to have 6 of the same 8 players, and it's really going to come down to who are those 2 players that are different, and that's really where our money's going to go, right? So you've got to have a delicate balance, kind of, where you obviously don't want to play crappy players just to be different. I'm not going to punt 2 tight ends just because, Scott's not going to punt 2 tight ends, I'm going to show him. I'm giving you money, So you want to be unique, but you still want to play good players. So if we go back to my original example when we were talking about value, where, I said, I can play Justin Jefferson, and I can get a value doing so because everyone's going other directions. And, maybe in a normal week, Justin Jefferson in a tournament, will get 10, 15% ownership, 20% ownership. If I come across a week where Justin Jefferson's going to be under 5% owned, he's still Justin Jefferson, right? Like, who's to say he's not going to still have the best week of the entire season? One thing that I've also said a lot is, if you are entering a tournament lineup, doesn't really work for cash as much, but if you're entering a tournament lineup and you feel really comfortable and really good about all of your plays, I would strongly suggest scrapping it and starting again. There should be some uncomfortability somewhere, and usually for me that'll be tight end. But if you feel really good about your lineup and everyone's going to be great this week, you're probably doing what everyone else is doing. I'm not saying you can't win money that way. I'm not saying that that's not necessarily a good lineup. That's a lineup that I would not play.
I find that really interesting, but I think it's because we play different styles. For me, I feel really good about my lineup because I spent a crap ton of time researching it, and I really feel good about the work that I put in. So I guess it depends then, like you said, the style of play. But if you're playing like I am and you feel really good about it, that's the one I go with. That's my lineup.
So when I'm building my lineups, my cash lineup will be like that. My cash lineup, I mean, don't get me wrong, there will be times where I'm playing somebody, and it's usually a punt tight end, that I'm like, well, I'm not changing anybody else. I've got $2,700 spent at tight end. I'm just going to play the guy that I can afford, because everyone else I'm just too confident in, that I'll lock in. So, so that brings me to another important point is, if you really like Kelly, right? You're like, oh man, Kelly's super awesome. Like, she's just the best. I love Kelly. But you're playing MME. She's probably not the best person in the world to go for advice. Not that she doesn't know what she's talking about, but her mindset is going to be a little bit different. Especially, Well, especially though if you don't explain to her, hey, I'm playing MME. If you're just asking her a question, hey, do you like A or B? Well, my first question to somebody is, what are you playing? Like, I don't like, you know. But the point of that is, you know, once you've determined, you know, your goal and how it is that you want to play, seek out like-minded individuals, you know, because, you know, the advice that I give you could be absolutely terrible if you're playing double ups, and Kelly would be the person that you want to go to, you know, because I'm going to be a little more, you know, I'm going to be a little more risky. You know, I'm willing to take shots on things, maybe not in cash, but in like a single entry. I think single entry wise, that's kind of the in between for Kelly and I. You know, that's kind of where Kelly and I would be a little more similar. I'm assuming I would be a little more risky than she would be, just because of, again, the way my brain works. That's why I'm better in your 20 maxes and your 150 maxes, because my brain that's just the way my brain works. It just works differently than Kelly's. Doesn't mean that, you know, I'm any smarter or better than her. It just means that's where I excel. And, you know, if Kelly's sitting there, like she said, she very rarely loses a double up. I play a lot of cash, and I can tell you right now, I win, but I would not say I barely lose. So, you know, somebody reached out to me and said, hey, I got a cash question, right? You know, and Kelly and I were in the same community. I'd say, I mean, I'd be happy to answer that question for you, but Kelly's really the person you should be speaking to. You know what I mean? So, you know, figure out what it is that you want to do, how you want to play, and then seek out people with that same mindset, because those are the opinions that are going to be more valuable to you than just simply finding somebody and then you guys aren't on the same wavelength, you know, and it doesn't work.
Also, when you are reading content and taking in content, that content creator should be telling you what kind of contest that they are playing, and make sure that that's what you want to play. And sometimes I don't give an entire lineup either, and that can be used for a lot of different kinds of tournaments. And I don't tell you what kind of tournament to play in, just that these 3 guys I'm going to be using in some fashion, and here's why. And I will list out the current rostership. I will list out all of the reasons why, so that my reader can then take that and put it in a bazillion entry tournament or use it for themselves. So just make sure that you're getting the full picture when you are reading advice, and that should keep you from, you know, keep you fairly in line and safe. Do we have other questions? Because I think we're coming up here on time.
That's what I was going to ask you. Anybody got any other questions?
Ooh. Well, if you guys want 8 minutes of your life back, I'm happy to wrap up. Thank you so much for attending and hearing what we have to say. And do you have anything else? All right. Thanks, guys.